the FAFSA, and why is it important for students and student athletes to know about?
So the FAFSA is an acronym for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And as I was thinking about this, it's the gateway. It's sort of the door. It's a gateway to access need-based financial aid. So any student who perceives themselves as having need is well served by completing the FAFSA. Once the FAFSA is completed, the information goes to the schools of their choice, and those schools use that to calculate the need-based financial aid.
Okay, so what does the financial aid process look like for recruits, their families, and other potential students as well?
So again, anyone who perceives themselves as having need, the first step is always to complete the FAFSA, and the FAFSA is released every October 1st. So the FAFSA for the academic year of 2021 through 2022, the next academic year, is already available, and it uses the income from 2019. So as long as you have filed taxes from 2019 and you have that material available to you, you can complete the FAFSA. Let's see, so that again is the gateway to need-based aid. And so it is the first step. Once the school that you're applying to receives the FAFSA, they use it to calculate financial aid. Most schools, well, for Earlham, that is all we need. Other schools might require additional materials, such as the document called the profile. I think that's what it's called, but Earlham does not require that.
How does someone fill out the FAFSA?
Well, there's a website. If you type in FAFSA and you look for a website name that ends with .gov, I should know this, but oops, it is the Federal Student Aid or fafsa.gov website. So when you start there, you're required to have a login. So you set up a login that is unique to the individual. Students and their parents, if they're dependents, must both have a FAFSA login ID and password. So students can begin the process or parents can begin the process, but you start on that federal website and make sure it's a .gov website, because there are places out there that try to get you to pay them to help you fill out the FAFSA. And because the word free is in the name of it, you should not have to ever pay anyone to fill out the FAFSA.
Can you walk us through how, the steps it takes to fill out the FAFSA?
All right, so once you have signed in on the website, there are two different views. You can have a view of what it might look like on your phone, so they are technologically up to date, or if you're on a computer, it's sort of a different view. I can show you some of the steps on the paper FAFSA. This is not what it would look like if you were completing it online, but the questions will be exactly the same. So you can get an idea of that. So the first section is always demographics. It's going to ask you for your name, address, social security number, phone number. Where you live is important because state aid is determined by the state you live in. And if you live in Indiana and you're coming to Earlham, state aid is very important. And I'll just add that you have to have the FAFSA completed by April 15th before tax day if you want to receive state aid from Indiana. So once driver's license and other things are added on this first section. If you're single, divorced, married, this is the student's information, not the parent's information. So the next section is going to ask you where you are in school. If you're an incoming student, we're assuming that you're starting off as a freshman. So it will ask you about where you went to school, whether you got a high school degree and so forth. What degree you're working on. Then the next section is again about the student's information. It's going to ask you if you filed taxes. If you didn't file taxes, that's not a problem, but you just need to make that clear in this section. It'll ask you if you're married or not, and then it'll ask you for your income information. Again, there is the information comes from your 2019, I don't know if you see my arrow here, my cursor, from the 2019 income. If you didn't file taxes, but you had a job and you made a few $100s, you need to include that income even though you didn't file taxes. There's also a process that's called the data retrieval tool, DRT, that can transfer the information from the IRS to the FAFSA. And the advantage of doing that is if your FAFSA is flagged for verification, which happens randomly to about 1/3 of the students, you don't have to give us additional documentation, for example, your tax return, if you use the data retrieval tool. So you can have this information transferred from your tax return, and it's a click of a button, pretty simple. So it gathers your information on your income and your savings. So how much you have in the bank, how much you have in your checking and savings account, whether you own any additional assets, if you own property, excuse me, or anything like that, you would need to include that. It asks for different additional miscellaneous kinds of information, whether you received income that wasn't taxable. So this additional income section and the untaxed income section. Then the important part for students here is determining whether you are dependent or independent. And these questions right here, 45 through 57, help us determine whether you are a dependent student or whether you have special circumstances that might require us to work with you to get additional information. Most students are going to find that they're dependent on their parents, but then special circumstances they might be. So if you answer yes to any one of these questions, you might be considered an independent student. Most cases, or in all cases, we're going to ask for documentation of why you were able to answer yes. So once you answer yes, you do not have to report your parents' information, your parents' income and asset information. But if you answered no to all of these questions, then you are dependent on your parents and you must provide their income and asset information. The next section is the parent information. Again, it checks to see whether your parents are married, divorced, whether they could be never married but living together. If they're your biological parents and they are not married but living together, you still need to include information for both of them. So this section determines which parents' asset and income information you need to include. Again, it asks for their name, address, social security numbers, and so forth. And then yes, how they completed their tax return. Again, it's 2019 tax information. Then it begins asking for the asset and income information for the parents. Also, if you had filed taxes, the parents can use the data retrieval tool as well, excuse me. And if you use the data retrieval tool and are flagged for verification, your parents will not need to provide their tax return as verifying document. It'll ask about parents' miscellaneous income, their untaxed income. And then we're back to the student. This is a piece that is important to get right. How many people are in your family? The instructions are very clear, and there are additional instructions if there's questions. But the individuals that you include in your family, it's between the academic year, the beginning of the academic year, July 1st, 2021 to June 30, 2022. And we also want to know how many students are in college in that academic year or will be in college. And Earlham asks students to verify this information. So if you think today that your sibling is going to be in school next year, but then your sibling decides not to go to school, so you put 2 on here because you completed it today, we're going to ask you next fall to verify that your sibling is in school, and if they are, it will change the information on the FAFSA. So it is important to be as accurate as possible with this question. Then the student has the opportunity to list 7 schools. I think it's 7. This looks like it's only 4 on the paper copy, but I think there's more on the electronic version. So the school ID is listed here. Oh, for Earlham, I think that's 001793. And, but you can look it up on the electronic version. You can look that up online. Then there's the process of signing it. Each person, the parent and the student, needs to sign this electronically, and a student can complete the student section and sign it and then tell the parent, then use the save key. There's a save key on the electronic version. You create a password and you pass that on to your parent, the save key, and the parent can sign in using that save key and go in and confirm that the answers to their section is right, or complete their section themselves and then sign it. But the parent must sign in using their own FAFSA ID and password in order to sign the FAFSA. And once you hit submit, it's sent off to the U.S. Department of Education, processed, and we get it about 2 days later. Once Earlham receives it, we use that to calculate the need-based financial aid students are eligible for.
So how does Earlham compare financial aid-wise to other schools?
Well, as a private school, each year we determine how we're going to package financial aid, and I think that's consistent with other schools. We don't necessarily know how they're going to calculate their financial aid. In fact, there's rules against that. So we do it independently based on who we want to attract and how much we have in financial resources to provide to students. So if you want to know what our financial aid is, you really have to apply and fill out the FAFSA in order to learn that. And then if you want to know how it compares to other schools, you have to do the same with the other school.
Okay, and finally, do you have any tips for recruits and potential students about financial aid?
Fill out the FAFSA as early as possible. Watch to see whether your FAFSA was flagged for verification. If it is flagged for verification, we're going to need additional documentation, and that can take some time to get together and to us, especially during times when places are closed. So once you complete the FAFSA, you will get an email with a report that tells you what your expected family contribution is, and that should be the figure that your family should be able to provide for your education. And then Earlham will process financial aid above that figure as much as we possibly can. We can't meet all students' needs, but we work hard to try to make our school as financially attractive as we can.
Okay.
And if you're in state in Indiana, it is absolutely imperative that you get the FAFSA done by April 15th. That means your parents have to have, and you have to have completed your 2019 taxes before you complete the FAFSA.
All right. Thank you. This is very helpful.
You're welcome. We're very pleased and happy to help any students. Our email address is FINAID, so the first 3 letters of financial and the word aid, FINAID@earlham.edu. Please reach out to that email address with any and all questions, and we try to be pretty prompt in responding. And even during COVID, we're watching our email constantly. So we're here and able to support you as much as possible.
For questions about financial aid, email finaid@earlham.edu. To follow Earlham Cross Country and Track and Field on Instagram, it's @Earlham XCTF. Thanks for watching, and go Quakers!